Alrighty, so in this little tutorial series here, we're going to be looking at the loader and the different attachments for loading, as well as picking our trailers for what types of logs we're going to be doing. So I have the loader here set up. We're going to do a quick review of that first, and then we'll get into the trailers. So here we have a different pile of grapples. Now there's all kinds of different types of grapples, and whichever one you use is entirely personal preference, whatever works best for you. So generally for short logs, I'll use a fixed head with a big grapple like this. And when I say short logs, I say little tiny pieces like this, as opposed to long logs, which are these really long chunks of tree. So if we're going to be using smaller wood, I usually go for a very tight little kind of fist-looking grapple like this guy. That way you can get a lot of logs in the grapple, and it still holds the little guys really well and stable. If I'm planning on doing long logs, I'll generally pick something like the button top. The button top is a head that has two sets of stabilizers off the side and kind of this smaller claw in the middle. Now the purpose of this is to use these outside stabilizers to stabilize the weight from one end of the log so it keeps it nice and level while you're loading. That's kind of the purpose of using this one. So if I'm doing long logs, I'll generally use this guy. If I'm doing short logs, I'll generally try to use a type of grapple like this. Now, there's different variations of this kind of grabby grapple with the multiple claws on it, but they're generally all the same kind of concept. Anything with a stabilizer is obviously for longer logs. It just gives you more versatility. Now, switching over, there's two different types of other grapples, so I'm going to skip that one for now. We would have the Dangle Grapple, as I explained in that first tutorial video. This is basically just another way to load. Again, it's very similar to how this grapple works, except the difference is it will have a sway in it back and forth, similar to the other dangle heads you've seen. Now, this guy here is considered a heel boom. Now, on lots of machines, the heel booms are attached already to the heads, but I made this version that allows you to attach it to any head you want just to kind of have some fun with it. It has a dangle head on the end. As you can see, it kind of falls down there, and it's got a fixed point right here. So the purpose of this guy is for stabilizing long logs, similar to what the button top does, but kind of a little bit more of a different way. So before we get started, I want to make sure you guys know the best machine when you're loading or even sorting, in my opinion, is to use the high cabs. In this case, we got a John Deere, but there's multiple types, as I showed you in the attachment tutorial. High cabs are the best ones for loading because it lets you see over the stakes of the truck, which we'll get into here when we're doing loading. It also allows you to have kind of an upper view looking down on the log sort while you're working. So we're going to hop in this guy. As you can see, we're quite high up in the air, so we do have quite a range to play. Now we're going to look at the fixed head here real quick. I'm just going to go through them individually here. So now the fixed head, like I said, it's got a very large grapple and a very kind of small angle, so it's really easy to load short log trucks. So for shorter logs, you can get a really good grip on them and keep it really nice and stable. Now, a recent change with these heads that's come up, they actually have the ability to support the heads. So I'll show you something real quick here. Inside this head, and underneath this is just the physics going on, there's basically this little plate that kind of slides up and down. And this plate here applies pressure to the logs to keep them nice and stable so that you don't have to squeeze up on the grapples. So when you go to grab a log, it's a good log grabbing tutorial here as well. You don't need to completely close the grapple all the way to the top to grip that log. So if you squeeze it all the way, it'll actually get a little squishy and start stuttering and freaking out, and it's not good. So what you want to do is you want to grab the logs, and you just want to bring it to a point where they're sitting firmly. There's still a little bit of room in the grapple to be able to rotate. You can even grip it up a little more if you want. But you don't want to squeeze them right super tight because the game's physics just don't handle it the way real life does. So you want to back, if you ever get to the point where you close it too far, just back up your grapple a little bit and find a point where they kind of sit nicely without squirming around. That's the best way to do it. And that's just the way I have my grapples set up so that they're more efficient for loading. But make sure when you're doing it, you do not crush the logs. So if you're grabbing a big pile or a little pile, just grab a little bit. That plate inside the head that I was showing you just a second ago puts pressure on them so that the logs shouldn't necessarily slide from side to side or do anything funky like they did on previous versions. And this, like I said, is a great head, fixed head for doing that kind of work. So So we're just going to lay that down. Now we're going to go grab the dangle head version of pretty much that same type of claw, which is this guy here. Now on this version, again, it's got sway side to side, back and forth. It has dangle ability. Now these are a lot easier when you're loading big bunches of logs, but the problem is it's a lot harder to keep them kind of straight. So if I pick this up on this end, you can see how the logs kind of sag to the right. Same difference if I pick it up on the left-hand side, they're going to sag to the left. Or pick it up on the right-hand side, they'll sag to the left. So if I pick it up right in the middle, and you kind of got to find the balance point, you'll find kind of the best spot to grab them, and they'll balance. Now I'm only picking up 2 logs, so it's actually way harder with just 2 logs. If you go pick up maybe like a bunch of 4 or 5, it'll actually kind of stabilize itself. Now again, the same situation happens with the claws. You do not want to close them as tight as they'll go, because the head will start doing crazy things and floating around and acting weird. And see, like, I'm not touching the controls at all and it's acting crazy because the game doesn't like those physics. So if it starts doing anything weird where it's floaty or feels weird, just open your claw a little bit, back it up. So then you have full control of your head. There should be a little bit of free wiggle in that head. It shouldn't be right tight. But as you get more experience and you play with the claws, you guys will start to figure out how hard you can close logs, what the best way to grab is. I just wanted to put that out there as kind of a pre-warning for when you're picking up logs. Don't grip them all the way until they're jiggling. Just grip them so that they feel like they're nice and tight. And yeah, it'll be a nice balance. But you guys will 100% figure that out as you play. Just practice lots and it will all come to you. Now, moving on to doing longs. So this long piece that we have laying over here. In this case, we're going to start using the button top head. So now in the button top head, we have control of both the grapple claw, which is this one here, and we have control of the stabilizers, which are the outside stabilizers here. So the purpose of this, again, to show you an example, if I pick this log up at the butt and try to pick it up, you'll see that it kind of is tilting downward towards the ground. And as I lift it higher and higher and higher, it still tilts down to the ground, which is inefficient for loading. And same difference, if we go to the other side and try to pick it up from the top, it'll do the exact same thing where it sags down on the other end and we don't actually get any kind of even level situation. So the name of this grapple is actually a butt and top grapple, butt and top. The purpose for this is that you can grab the tree from any angle, and using the stabilizers, you can pick it up from the butt, or you can pick it up from the top and keep it level. So if I pick it up from the butt end, which is over here, if I try to raise my head up in the air, it will constantly tilt down, 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 as we just showed. But if I pick it up, close it, and I apply pressure with the stabilizers, you will now see that that is level, or starting to become level as I push down on the stabilizers. So now that allows me to have full rotation of this head. I'm just going to turn it over here so we can do this. So I can pick it up from this end and have it sit level and controlled. And you guys will find the best point to do that. And again, you don't want to grip it super hard because it'll start kind of doing like the shakes that it's doing right now if you put too much pressure. So you want to kind of just find that medium spot. And it's really hard with the game physics aren't perfect, but you can eventually find the best way to do that. And the other difference is I can pick it up from the other end. So let's slide it this way. And that's the purpose of the button top, is that you can pick it up from either end. And then again, I can apply pressure on this end to keep it so that it's level. See how it's not sagging down to the end anymore? Because it actually applies pressure to both sides, forcing it up. All right, so that's the button top. Now this, in my opinion, is the most efficient tool for loading longer logs, because if you grab a big grapple of logs, you can actually just kind of use this to find a nice level point. Keep them all level for when you're loading, which is a huge, huge help, and we'll show that off here in just a minute. Next one is the Dangle heel boom. So we're going to attach this guy. Now, sometimes if your head is turned crooked, this can attach a little weirdly. So for some reason, if it's like off on an angle, all you got to do is hit G on your keyboard, and G basically switches it so that you're controlling the head's alignment. Line it up to where you're happy, then just hit G again, then you'll have control of the secondary head. And that might, you guys will have to play with that to feel it out. So the purpose of this head is similar to what the button top does. But this one stabilizes it in a different way. So on the end, we have this free hanging piece here for picking up logs. Now, if you're doing sort or you're trying to load from the back, what this does is it has an alternating point, which you can control. So this little tail here will basically become the stabilizer, similar to this thing, for the whole pile of wood that you're picking up. So if I go in and pick up this little piece, and I'm trying to control it, it's going to go kind of all over the place. Like, it's always going to tip down. No matter how high I lift it, it's always going to be pointing down to the ground. So now the purpose of using this dangle heel part is if you try to grab it, you can now press that heel into the bottom and it'll pop it up. Now, this is not the most perfect system compared to the button top because it's not fixed. So what I've done is I've included a locking strap on this one. So if you hit L, it'll actually lock that tree or a bunch of trees to the back end of that just to help stabilize it if you need it. That way you have almost perfect control of that log so it's nice and straight. You can do it this way with it loose, but it kind of flops around. You got to really kind of aim it and control it. So I put that locking strap on there for people who really want to do proper hoe chucking and keep it attached properly. So again, once it hits there, just hit L, and then you can actually bring the wood over to this side without it sagging down. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so that's the purpose of these guys, the different types of grapples. I just wanted to show off how they work and what they're for. You guys will be able to play with those and figure out what works best for you. So now we're going to head over to the loading area, but before we do that, I want to show you guys our selection of trailers. So now that we have all the wood sitting out in the bush, it's all processed and ready to go, we have to decide what trailers we want to use to pick it up. So now there are 3 types of trailers, well, 4 types kind of. So we have a long trailer for the very longs, usually 13.6. We have a medium. I think that'll fit up to 9s, maybe even 11s is the best for that one. We have the short log trailer, which will fit all the 5.6s and 7s. And then we have the pup trailer, which also fits 5.6s and 7s. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to buy a short log trailer and a pup, which is this guy here. And I'm also going to buy a longer trailer, which is this guy here. And again, you can just pick one of the haul trucks. It doesn't matter which one, haul truck 1, 2, or 3. I'm going to pick this one. We're going to make it black just for the entertainment here. Or kind of a charcoal gray, I guess. Again, now what you want to do is you want to hook up. And this is kind of a crappy yard for trying to hook up trailers, but we're going to do it anyway. We're going to hook up to the back end. So all you got to do is back up to the trailer, hook it up like that. You now are hooked onto this trailer. So this is the long log trailer. And actually, this is probably what we're going to end up using because we have both longs and shorts out there. And this is stuff you'll have to decide as you log. Here, I'm just going to put this off to the side here. You will have to decide what you need. So right now, we know by going out to the bush. Oh, I don't have any machines out there yet. We have both 5.6 meter, which are these short little trailers here. And we have longs, which will fit on this trailer. So in this case, we can actually take that long logger with this short logger pup, hook them up, and be able to load both types of wood in the bush on this trailer and bring them back. Now, if I had cut just 5.6s and didn't have any longs, we could use this trailer combined with this trailer, or we could just use this short logger by itself and fill up both bunks. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take advantage of having both types. So I'm going to back this up. And backing these up is a little bit more work once you get the pup trailer on there. And I'm not the best master of backing up here, so I can't promise we're going to hook this up right away. Normally you'd have a little more space, not right next to your gas station. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to kind of meander it back here, and I am terrible at backing up. So let's go like this. This is good for new people because then you can see how bad I am at backing up. So then if you guys are bad at backing up, you won't feel so bad. But also if you're really good at backing up, you're going to make me look like a fool here. Okay, so basically you want to line it up so that this hitch is at least close to this back trailer. And then you'll get a little message that pops up on the bottom that says, connect to the pup trailer. Hit Q. And then we now have both of those trailers attached in kind of a train formation. So now we know we can fill the long log trailer, and we can also fill the short log trailer if we want with what we have out there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring this loader, a couple of the attachments out, probably the button top and probably the power clam here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to show you guys how to load the trailers and get them back to the mill. Okay, so once you're actually out towards your pile here, you want to position your trailer and truck in a way that makes it easy for it to get back to the mill. So generally what I usually like to do is to turn around the trailer as much as possible and have it facing the direction of the mill, which is behind us. So we kind of laid our stuff on the road here, so we're just going to kind of roll off to the side here. Now in this case, it's such a long trailer, it's going to be a little funky trying to whip this around, so we're just going to give it a shot here. Normally you need a little bit more room to turn around, but I think we can pull it off. Let's see if we can back this up. Now again, backing these trailers up with the pup on, it does like a weird thing. So instead of backing up straight, like if I make this go left, that pup trailer is going to go to the opposite way. See how it kind of, even though I'm forcing this trailer to go left, that one's, or go right, that one's going left. So sometimes it does require you to kind of play with it, to straighten it out, to find what works best for you. And if you see the other trailer going the opposite direction, you kind of, it takes a little bit of a mind mess around to realize that. So you see if I go that way, it goes that way. And if I go that way, it starts to turn the opposite way. So, although it is a lot more work, and then you can just be lazy like me and accordion it. And we're going to go over here. Okay, so I'm going to line this up right along here. And that's generally a good spot to do that. So basically you want to line it up so that you're within reach of your longs, your shorts, everything you want. And obviously you can move the truck and trailer around more so if you need to. I'm just going to grab the loader and bring it out here, and then we can start showing off how to actually load the trucks and trailers. Okay, so now we got our loader out here. What I've done is I've parked it kind of in line with our piles here. So now it's entirely up to you how you want to park your machine to load the logs, whatever. You can park straight on facing the pile, you can park off to the side, on top of the pile. It's really up to you how you want to do it, whatever works for you. In real life in the bush, there are multiple different ways people load logs onto trucks, and some different types of environment, whether it's steep or weird roads, can force you to kind of change up your technique. So it's good to try different angles and try different stuff and just become an overall really good loaderman doing it that way. The more different angles and stuff you try, the better off you're going to be. So I'm just going to pull this ahead so that our pup trailer is a little more lined up, because we're going to do shorts first. So what I usually do, if you can see in the bottom, is I try to line that trailer's center up with the center of my loader. So if this is the center, you should be able to look through that in a picture frame and see kind of the center of your spindle on that loader there. Now, again, distance is something that is seems to be very relative. It's up to you what each person likes. I've seen some people who like to load from as far back as they possibly can, and I've seen people who like to load while they're pretty much as close as possible, where they're like right up kissing the stake with the front of their cab. I'm kind of a medium range. I like to be about here. That's usually really good for me. The point being for this is you want to make sure your machine is positioned in a way so that the center of your grapple is always going to land in the center on your turn. So, for instance, if I'm parked here, if I spin and grab logs, when I turn back, I want the center of that claw to be lined up with the center of this bunk, because that will always make sure that you're going to be pretty much within a safe range of loading. And then as you get better, you can do different angles, but this is obviously the best way to do it for lining up. For instance, if I'm parked too far back, so if I'm parked like over here and I'm trying to load, you can still load that way, but your visibility is much lower and your depth perception's off. So like that may work for some people, but it doesn't really work for me super well. So if I'm loading, I now have to kind of try to line it up with center. It's much better if you're just in the center. And for new people who are just starting, one thing you can do is find a spot where you're happy in your deck here. So for instance, I know I'm really happy here. I can reach those logs, I can reach those logs, and I can stretch, but I can even reach those logs, so I'm good to go. But if this is where I want to park, I can actually turn my head sideways if I want, and I'll park it and I'll leave it this high off the ground, way up. So that way when I come in with my truck, even if my truck was parked over here, I can see where I need to line up my stakes for that truck, and I'll pull in so that the center of the stakes are lined up with that claw. That's kind of an easier way to do it. And it saves you kind of driving back and forth and trekking back and forth with your loader if your logs are kind of off center. So for the first beginning, we're going to do loading short logs. Short logs are one of the more easy things to load because they're very short and there's not a lot of whip to them. So they're pretty easy to do. So you want to just go in for your grab. You want to grab them in the center of the pile, center of the logs as well. And again, as I was explaining earlier in this tutorial, you don't want to grip to the point where you're crushing the logs. You want to close it so that you find kind of a happy amount grabbed in there. And you want to look at the bottom of your load to make sure that there's no gap. So if this, like this, these logs I can tell you right now are not going to fall out. But if there was a giant gap, like the claws, so we'll do a bigger gap here. We'll go like this and grab these. So now if we have a big gap on the bottom, as you can see, one log actually fell out. Let's raise it a little higher, make a mess here. So as you can see, there's a gap. So it's a potential that these logs will actually shimmy and pop out of that gap. So the more logs you try to grab in a grapple, the more chance you're going to be of dropping them out the bottom, like that. See how they're starting to kind of fall down? That's not what you want. So don't go for big grabs, especially if you're new. I see lots of new guys starting this game who just want to grab all the wood in one grab. Well, don't do that because it doesn't work super well. Start with smaller bites, just a little bit at a time. So even that's lots. You don't need more than that in one grab. That'll hold it well. You have lots of clearance on your bottom claws. You see how much room we have of overlap on those claws? So you know it's not going to fall out. You got a good grip on it. And you don't need more than that at a time if you're doing loading, to be honest. So another advanced technique, I'm going to do an advanced technique real quick. If these logs are not lined up with each other, so you see how they're kind of all over the place, they're not flush, they're kind of sticking out. There's something called penciling you can do, and this is advanced, so I mean, don't expect to do this right off the bat if you can't, and don't feel bad if you can't, because a lot of guys just don't have the controls for it, or they just haven't figured it out. So an advanced technique to butt up those logs is to turn your head to the side like this, and then let them kind of slide down. And then as they slide down, grip that back up again, and then straighten it. So you see how those edges are a little straighter? We could probably even do better than that. Grip, turn, and then they're kind of straight again. So that's one way to turn it to keep it all lined up. The other way is to just butt them up in the pile. So if we drop them, we can actually butt them up by just kind of going in like that, and it kind of keeps them all straight. Another advanced technique, if you have another loaded bunk on the trailer, so let's kind of get these out of sort here. So let's go like this. So again, if they're kind of all weirded out like that and they look a little funky, if you have another loaded bunk, you can actually push these on that bunk and slide them. I'm just using the bunk itself, but normally there'd be a bunch of logs in the middle, and you can actually slide them up to kind of center it a bit, and then you can kind of wiggle them so it's straight. But for the most part, you guys aren't going to have to worry about that because you guys are going to make really nice processor piles, right, from the last tutorial. So you're not going to worry about that. They'll all be lined up and ready to go. So the other thing these fixed heads have, the dangles do not have them, but the fixed heads have them, is a locking strap for new people who don't quite understand the controls or need help with it. So as you're closing your claw, they'll sit kind of here. Now, if you hit L, it'll throw this orange strap around the bottom. So that way, it's holding the logs in kind of this safety net. So now your claws can be fully open and these logs aren't going anywhere. You can even close your claws all the way through them because it makes it so it doesn't slide around. But I only use these in the most extreme cases, like in multiplayer I use them quite a bit because of lag. The trees have a tendency to kind of fly around in multiplayer. So sometimes if I do a big grab, I'll lock it right here if I'm in multiplayer. So as you can see through that little gap, there's that orange strap now. And then as I go to pencil it, I'll unlock it so they fall. And then as they line up, I hit L again, locks it. You can keep them all nice and straight. Again, on single player, you don't really need to use the locking straps, but there are no rules, and this isn't real life. In real life, the physics are a little bit better, so you don't have to worry about the logs sliding around quite as violently. But in this game, they have a tendency to kind of skip side to side. So anyhow, going back to how things work here, we go up to our pile, and whatever way you're facing it, you want to get a little bit of a bite. Nothing too crazy. You don't want to overfill your grapple, but that's lots right there. You want to spin it around to your truck, and you want to line it up so that there's a little bit of meat or a little bit of the tree sticking out on both ends. So for instance, on this side of the stake, we got a bunch of trees sticking out. On this side of the stake, we got a bunch of trees sticking out. That's what you want. If we load it too far to this side, obviously we'll have a whole bunch of room on this side. But then if we hit a bump on the road, these things will slip out and fall between the stakes and get tied up in your tires and make a big mess. So we don't want that. So let's load them all like this, and we're just going to push them lightly up against that back stake. So you can see as I press it into the trailer, it kind of lifts the trailer up almost a little bit. In real life, you would not want to put a whole lot of pressure on that, just a little bit to know you're touching, and then you want to kind of drop it down like that. And same difference, we go back to the pile again. We're going to grab another big, nice bite here. Let's get, whoops. There we go. And if you feel that the logs are kind of weird gripped, you can kind of play with the grip on them, close them, open them, just see how it feels. I don't like the way those are lined up, so I'm going to pencil that just to kind of straighten them up a little bit. And then I'm going to turn it the other way. Sometimes the logs are kind of funky. There we go. And that's a lot better. Now, the other thing you got to pay attention to, if you do have fatter ones and shorter ones, as you build your bunk with these short logs, if you're constantly putting the butts to this end, see all the fat ends are on this end, and then all the scrawny ends are on this end. If you're constantly building the butts up on one side, what's going to happen is you're going to have a really heavy side pointing down, and then they'll start to slide off each other. So for instance, if the butts are this way, we're going to turn the butts the opposite way. These logs are very similar in size, so it shouldn't be too big of a deal. But as you do this, you want to kind of rotate the trees one way to the other. That way, you're constantly building a level bunk. And I just go in here and I kind of tap the trees with the grapple a little bit. Just kind of push them around really gently. You don't want to slam it around in there. Just to kind of flatten it out and build a nice base for your next drop. So then when you kind of go in here, you can see they're kind of flattened out a little bit. They're not all ganged up on one side. The last thing you want to see is big gaps in your logs. You want to try to keep them as tight and compressed as possible for the best load. Now, if you're loading on a weird hill or a weird angle or anything like that, because of the Giant's physics system, as I click these, oh, these are actually nice and level, but sometimes what will happen is that I call it creep. So what they'll do is they'll start to slide, as I'm kind of demonstrating here. They'll start to slide kind of back and forth like this. But if you're on a weird angle, you'll notice that they kind of start to slide off the front. So if you're a really slow loaderman and you're just getting started, don't worry about it. Just every time you do a drop, so every time you grab logs and put them in the grapple, run over to your truck and hit L. And what it'll do is it'll lock those logs in there so they don't move. So that way if you're on a weird funky hill or something, these logs are now strapped down. They're not going to slide around. They're not going to go anywhere. That's really important. And in multiplayer, if you're playing with your buddies or whatever, and somebody's being the log truck driver, I highly recommend, and we do this in our multiplayer, whoever's driving the truck, keep an eye on the guy loading you. As he's loading you, every time he does a drop into the stakes, just lock it as he's going back. So if I just drop those logs, if I'm going back for another grab, that's when the guy in the truck should lock that load just to keep it nice and stable. While this guy gets another grab, and then as I grab the next section of logs, which are going to be these ones, as long as I don't get that piece in there, there we go. I'm coming back as I get to this point. If you're the truck driver, just unlock it now. Let me load it up here, like so. That's kind of a funky grab there. If you feel your pieces are off too, you can also do this technique, which is nice, where you just grab the ends and just kind of butt it. Doot, doot. And you can go this way. And I don't like how far those stick out, so I can butt it that way. Whoops, that was kind of funky there. And I don't like them crossing each other, so I'll push it down, I'll wiggle them around, just so I know everything's sitting nice and straight. And then, again, if you're on a hill and you're starting to see them slide, just go back in and push that locking button again to keep them from sliding off. Okay, so let's go here. We'll grab this one, and we'll grab this one. And that's your short logs. Now, there are even more... actually, we're going to put the butts this way because I see it's building up on the back of it. There are more advanced techniques where you can actually use a long logger and build something called a cradle, where you basically cradle in the wood. And the process to that is basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to put the logs higher on the outside and the outside while leaving a space in the middle like a U, and that's a cradle. And then what you can do is if you do that with long logs, so if you built a cradle where it was an actual U and there's a bunch of gaps in the middle, you can take shorts and you can pile them into the middle without them falling out of the bunk. It's a little more complicated, but I have a few videos where I've done it. I'm not going to cover that today because it is pretty advanced and we don't really have everything set up for that. So that's the coverage of doing the short logs for loading them on the short log trailers. Again, these are 5.6 meter logs. You can also do it with 7s and still have lots of room. Anything over a 7, you'd want to use a medium or long trailer to play with. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to swap this head out. I'm going to put the button top head on it, and I'll show you how we load the longs. Alrighty, so now we got the button top grapple all set up and ready to load our longs. So now our trailer's a little bit far ahead, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to back it up. Now, if you have a bunk of logs on the back already kind of ready and you don't want to move them again, just hit L. Make sure they're locked, because anytime you try to drive ahead, what'll happen is, and I'm going to try to demonstrate it here. So watch those logs. If I back up and I brake, you see how they're starting to slide? So I brake again. Oh, they're sliding off. Don't want that. Go forward, brake. So if you put a locking strap across them by hitting L, then those don't go anywhere. That's really important that you do that. So always make sure after you load a trailer, whatever the case you're doing, you always lock it. Okay, so now on to the button top. So the button top, again, as we demonstrated, was for picking up the logs, whether it be from the butt or the top. It's really good for loading logs and keeping them nice and stable. So for instance, if I try loading this without using the stabilizers, what'll happen a lot of times, and actually these might stay straight because they're not very weird logs. So they'll dip down to one side like this. Also, sometimes if they're backwards or in weird kind of shapes, it's really hard to load them because they'll kind of go all over the place. They kind of get forky, so like that. So you see kind of where they kind of, some kind of go up, some kind of go down. It's all weird on that end. So what I'll generally do is I'll try to grab them kind of a little bit more towards the butt, but not right up. So like kind of about there. And then once you do, you can push your stabilizers down. And what that does is it levels the logs so that everything sits nice and level. They're not all going cockeyed left and right. At this point, I do the same thing where I kind of keep my machine centered with the center of the stakes. So you want to kind of park it. I'm a little bit to the right, but that's okay. And what I generally like to do is I like to do butts forward, butts backward. So every turn, you're basically changing it up. So I'm just going to move around here a little bit. Oops, there we go. So we're going to do butts backward on the first grab. There we go. And then as you put your logs in, you can actually lift your stabilizers to let them kind of settle. I kind of put these a little far. So this is good training here. So you see how far I've put these butts ahead, or the pieces ahead on the front, but I've left them kind of really short on the back. Now this is not intentional, and I didn't want to do that. But if you're getting out and you're noticing that they're riding really close to the cab and you don't want that, just go in and grab the whole of the logs and slide them back. Oops, I can't see the tip of my grapple there because of that little bar. We're just going to slide those back a bit because we know we got lots of room on the front. Now, what I really prefer to do, as you can see, I kind of grabbed some toppy, ugly-looking trees here. If you have bigger pieces laying around, like these big, I only have one of these because we only cut one of that size tree. But if you have a whole bunch of these bigger pieces, use these pieces first to kind of build a foundation and then lay the little sharp ones down on top. So what I would do is I would actually go through, put these on here. And longs are a little bit more tricky because there's a lot more tree you got to look at both ends. Shorts, you can see all the full length of the tree while you're playing with it. Okay, so I'll put that about there. Now, if you have these nice kind of uniform trees that don't really have a top on them, you can really lay those down as a base. And you can see it's solid all the way through, where these ones kind of thin out and get a little breaky. So I would probably 100% try to use these bigger pieces first, but we don't really have enough of them. So same difference. You just keep grabbing them. Because these are all 13.6, they will fit on this trailer, no problem. So let's go grip those up. And because last time we put all the butts to the back, on this turn I'm going to put all the butts to the front. So you just kind of rotate it around like so. And the biggest trick for making sure you're lined up, because I know a lot of people have a problem when they're loading where the head is kind of like, oops, I can't even do that. There we go. Where it feels like they're kind of off center. So when you're loading, make sure if you're straight with this pile, So if you pick them up and your bunny ears, which are your stabilizers, I call them bunny ears, are straight with it, if you turn, don't turn your head at all, like your twist. Just keep it straight, and then as you turn, that log head should turn with you so that it's straight. Now, if you got to move it up, that's when you got to start incorporating some turn. You can either walk the machine ahead and back if you're facing the right way, or you can make micro adjustments on this head by just kind of tapping and then going in and doing your grab. But it's not something that I can just really teach by telling you the only way to do it, because every single person is different how they learn kind of the depth perception, and everybody's different how they learn where their head is. But you always want to make sure your head is facing down and straight with your load. So you don't want your head pointing up at a weird angle. You don't want your head pointing back at you at a weird angle. You don't want it twisted off to the side because you're not going to have good drops. You want to keep your head nice and straight, always pointing down as much as humanly possible, because that will give you the best loading technique that you can get. So again, make sure you're nice and level when you go in for your grab. Nice and level. Close this. That's also nice and level. And again, we're straight. As we turn, we're already level, so we don't have to do any weird adjustments. All we got to do is just kind of drop it on the deck. And if you're off to the side, because I'm kind of loading on a weird angle here, you can turn your head so you can find kind of the angles of your spot. But that's stuff that will come with time and experience. I have no doubt that all of you are going to be really good at this by the time you play around with it. But don't get frustrated. If it's bugging you, take a break, you know. Don't force yourself, don't push yourself. You're not going to be an amazing operator just overnight. You have to really work at it. And then eventually you'll get the technique down where you can kind of, you know, move a little faster. They always say the old adage, you know, get good, then get fast kind of thing, right? So don't try to run into it thinking you're going to be just as smooth as the rest of us that you see operating, because it took me a long time. It took me years of doing this, a lot of hours. So if you're ever thinking, oh man, I can't play that good, I'll never be that good. Well, that's not true, because if you don't believe me, go watch my very first Farming Simulator 2013 logging video, and you guys will see exactly how bad I was. So if you guys want to get good, you can. You just got to take the time and work on it. So yeah, that basically sums up loading. There are different techniques and different things you guys can do for loading and piling and moving logs around, but that gives you the general idea of how to load a truck and get it going. Now, in this same video, I'm going to show you the unloading of the truck as well, just so we can kind of kill all the birds with one stone in this film. So once you get this thing all loaded up, you want to make sure all of it is locked so that it can't slide off, and then basically just head back in the direction of the mill. And then once we get to the mill, I'll show you guys the different ways to unload it. All right, so as you're starting to come back to the mill, now we have two options for how we can sell our wood. On my maps, I have a sell point. So either you can use a machine to unload all the logs and throw them inside these little red markers here, and then just run over and hit R on this to sell them. Or if you're really lazy and you don't want to unload them all, I'm not actually going to sell them this way because I want to save them for our next plan here, but as long as you're parked within these yellow squares here, you can now hit R and it will actually just sell that load right off the truck. So you don't have to actually unload them or do any kind of physical movement of any kind. This is what I call like the easy way to unload. So if you're not into unloading, you're more like the loading side, you can just do it that way and sell all your logs at one time to get rid of them. Now, the way that's more advanced and the way I recommend everybody to do it if you want to have a good time, go into your buy menu by hitting P for purchase, go into FDR Logging, and you'll see this giant placeable sawmill. So double click on that guy, and it'll let you place it on the map. Now, this guy is a huge sawmill, so sometimes you need to cut out an area for it. And a lot of cases, it'll let you put it even if there's trees behind it. So we're just going to cheat here, and I'm going to put it right about here. Sure, that looks good. Okay, so now this giant sawmill has this in-feed ramp right here. This ramp pulls in the wood into that grinder, and then it turns it into money into your bank account. So the best way to unload that, and there's no rules, it's relative, it's totally up to you what you want to use to unload. You could go take that loader from the bush, bring it over here, use the grapple to unload it all onto the platform. But I do have a machine specifically built for unloading logs, which is the high stacker. So this is the LeBaire High Stacker, and we're going to bring this bad boy over here. Now, the LeBaire High Stacker has stabilizers on it. It also already has a clam specifically built for unloading trucks, so you don't have to attach anything to it or do anything special. This is a specialty unloading machine. Same with the Laterno. I'm not going to get into the Laterno, but you guys, if you want to play with it, you guys can go look at that as well. So this guy has stabilizers on it, so I'll park it generally, you know, somewhere close to the mill. It's entirely up to you. Lower the stabilizers, which also raises the cab. Now, from this view, you have a huge range, a huge area, and you have a really long reach with this claw. Like I said, we can get all the way over there with that claw, which is a crazy long reach. So now what you want to do is you want to bring your truck up alongside of it. In this case, you can unload longs with it. Normally, I just use it for shorts, but I'm going to use it for longs today just to be extra wacky. This is kind of a weird way to do this, but we're doing it this way anyway. Oh, don't forget to unlock your load. I unlock both front and back. Now, with this head, we can go in. And again, this head does have locking straps, so if you're unloading and you're kind of sketchy about it, like even these might be a little sketchy, you can just hit L. It'll lock those so that they don't go anywhere. And then all you got to do is bring it alongside your ramp and just get the wood onto that ramp, and it does the rest for you. So just drop it all in there, like so. And what will happen is that wood will slowly drag its little butt all the way down to that grinder. And then as it grinds, you'll start to see money pop up in your bank account. Now, this sell point over here will give you much more money than this one, but I find this one to be a little bit more realistic in the amount of money it gives you. It'll give you maybe 10 to 20 grand for like a full load versus this one, which sometimes gives you like 100 grand, which is crazy. So this is the harder way to go, but it's something really fun about being able to put the wood on the ramp yourself and make it get all eaten up in there. So I'm going to lock that back again real quick while I move it. So let's move that up there. And again, you want to bring it just kind of alongside it. It's up to you where you want to park. But this, like I said, this claw in here is specifically built for removing logs off of trucks. It has a huge grapple, and usually even a fully loaded truck can take maybe 2 grapples before it's unloaded. And the more centered you grab it, the better. Again, if you're the loaderman, make sure you center it nice for the people who are unloading it. I'm actually just going to move that up a little bit. We'll put it right there. And that's all you got to do. That's for unloading and selling. Very straightforward. And then once it gets sold, your wood's good to go. Lock it up, and you can head back to the bush for your next load. So yeah, that basically concludes loading trucks and unloading trucks for a very basic nature there. If you guys have any questions about that, please let me know. But if not, we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks.